The story opens with a couple bound by a shared obsession with the edge. Sasha and her husband, Tommy, live for the thrill of rock climbing, constantly seeking out vertical peaks that push the human body to its absolute limits. Their ultimate goal is a notoriously brutal, sheer mountain face in Norway, a vertical labyrinth of stone that has defeated Sasha time and again. Tommy has conquered it once before, but for Sasha, it has become a haunting fixation. This trip is supposed to be the one where she finally breaks her curse, and her determination has hardened into a dangerous, unyielding stubbornness. They are elite climbers, equipped with advanced safety gear and a specialized portaledge, a hanging tent designed to let them sleep suspended directly on the cliffside so they never have to lose ground by descending for rest. At the first light of dawn, Sasha is already packing up the hanging camp, her eyes locked on the rock face. But the mountain is unforgiving. Every time she reaches a specific, agonizingly technical crux on the cliff, her grip fails, and she plunges into the void, caught only by the violent snap of her safety ropes. Tommy watches her exhaustion grow and pleads with her to take a break, to breathe, but Sasha is completely blinded by her fixation. To make matters worse, a ferocious alpine storm is fast approaching, twisting the freezing air around them. In her heightened emotional state, Sasha can no longer think rationally. It takes every ounce of Tommy's patience to finally calm her down, convincing her to pitch the hanging tent once more so they can shelter from the howling winds. They agree to wait out the storm and strike again the moment the weather breaks. Sasha reluctantly yields, but her inner fire hasn't cooled, and a dark, suffocating dread begins to settle over Tommy. Looking down at his lucky compass, a sudden, chill premonition grips his heart, a silent whispering that this mountain might be their final resting place. He violently shakes the thought from his head, but fate is already in motion. Within hours, the tempest turns violent, battering their fragile hanging tent against the stone until staying suspended becomes a death sentence. Tommy realizes they have to abort the climb immediately if they want to live. He manages to convince a resistant Sasha, promising her that the mountain isn't going anywhere. He vows that tomorrow, he will use his own strength to support her through the lower sections, saving her energy for the peak. Reluctantly, Sasha agrees, and they begin the treacherous process of packing up their gear in total darkness, fighting against blinding sheets of rain and fierce, disorienting gusts of wind. Suddenly, the mountain fractures. A massive rockfall shatters the silence, raining colossal boulders down upon them. Terrified, Tommy screams for Sasha to drop first. She manages to scramble beneath a massive rock overhang just in time, finding temporary shelter. But above her, Tommy is completely exposed. A barrage of heavy stones slams into him, shattering his balance and sweeping him off the cliff face. As he plummets, his life hangs by a single thread, the secondary rope coiled tightly in Sasha's hands. She holds on with everything she has, but she is trapped in a horrific paradox. The sheer weight of his falling body is dragging her toward the edge, and the crumbling rock anchors above her are about to give way. If she keeps holding on, the next wave of falling boulders will obliterate them both. To make matters worse, Tommy is completely silent. She can't tell if he is already dead or merely unconscious. She has mere seconds to decide, risk both their lives on a faint hope, or cut the line to save herself. With a bleeding heart and an agonized scream lost to the wind, Sasha releases the rope. Tommy plunges into the dark abyss, disappearing onto the rocks below. In that same instant, the sudden shift in tension triggers a failure in Sasha's own harness. She slips, nearly following him to her death, but frantically claws at the wet stone, barely managing to anchor herself. The scene abruptly cuts to black. 5 months later, the vertical heights are gone, replaced by a suffocating, horizontal grief. Sasha is back home, a ghost of her former self, utterly consumed by a paralyzing survivor's guilt. The mountain climbing she once loved is dead to her, and she is desperately searching for a way to outrun the memory of her husband's falling body. In a desperate bid to create new memories that aren't tied to Tommy, she plans a solo trek deep into a dense, isolated wilderness. Before she enters the woods, a local forest ranger gives her a stark warning. He explains that these woods are incredibly hazardous, filled with apex predators and a disturbing history of hikers who simply vanish. He even shows her a bulletin board plastered with the fading faces of missing people. But Sasha's spirit is too broken to feel fear. She signs the registry and drives onward. Stopping at a remote outpost to gather final supplies, Sasha finds herself cornered and harassed by 2 intimidating local thugs. Just as the tension escalates, a rugged man named Ben steps into the shop. Delivering a shipment of locally made jerky, Ben uses his imposing presence to intimidate the thugs and chase them away. Grateful for the intervention, Sasha buys several packs of his dry meat as a thank you, noting it will be useful sustenance for the trail. But when she returns to her vehicle, she is bewildered to find that her GPS has completely malfunctioned, despite working perfectly moments before. Ben, watching from his truck, approaches her and offers a physical road map of the forest. He points out 2 distinct routes. One is a straightforward, well-traveled path that leads directly to her destination, while the other is a grueling, deeply isolated, and highly adventurous trail filled with stunning vistas. Drawn to the familiar call of a challenge, Sasha chooses the harder path, thanks him, and drives into the trees. That night, as she sets up camp in a lonely clearing, the two thugs from the outpost suddenly reappear, lurking around her tent. Terrified, Sasha retreats to her car, locking the doors and ignoring their taunts until they finally grow bored and disappear into the night. The next morning, shaking off the unease, she takes a small inflatable raft out onto a winding river to begin her wilderness adventure. After hours of paddling through the deep silence, she pulls the boat ashore on a remote bank, only to stumble upon a bizarre and chilling sight. Scattered through the brush is an array of abandoned hiking gear, personal belongings, and photographs, the very same faces from the missing person posters at the ranger station. Exhausted and trying to rationalize the discovery, she sets up her tent and falls into a heavy sleep. She is startled awake hours later by a subtle, rustling sound outside. Peeking out, she realizes someone has raided her campsite and stolen her primary backpack. As she turns to scramble back inside, a massive, venomous snake rears up from the darkness of her tent, preventing her from gathering the rest of her gear. Stripped of her survival supplies, she flees to the river, launching her boat in search of help. Soon, she spots a flickering campfire along the bank and steers toward it, overjoyed to find that the camp belongs to Ben. He welcomes her warmly, brushing off the theft by blaming it on wild animals, and feeds her fresh grilled fish. But as they talk, the atmosphere shifts from comforting to claustrophobic. When Ben casually reveals that he knows all about her past as an elite mountain climber and the tragic death of her husband, panic sets in. Sasha realizes she never mentioned any of this to him. The pieces of a horrific puzzle begin to click together in her mind. The sudden GPS failure when Ben appeared, his deliberate steering of her toward this isolated route, the stolen backpack, the missing people, it wasn't a series of unfortunate events. It was a calculated web. Before she can react, Ben drops all pretense. He tosses her stolen backpack at her feet and reveals a heavy tactical crossbow. Turning on a speaker that blares eerie music into the woods, Ben smiles a predatory, chilling smile. He tells her that this isn't just a random attack, it is a sacred ritual of the hunt, his favorite sport. He gives her a head start, telling her to run as far as her climber's legs can carry her. Driven by pure adrenaline, Sasha flees into the dark woods. In her blind panic, she launches her raft into the river but loses control, sweeping over the edge of a raging waterfall. The impact destroys the boat and leaves her badly bruised and bleeding, but she drags herself out of the freezing water. Changing into dry clothes from her pack, she starts running again, only to be drawn toward the haunting sound of a family's voice crying for help. Following the noise, she discovers a smartphone rigged to a tree, playing a video of a happy family enjoying the river, the very same family from the missing posters. Ben had used them as bait, and now he was using their memory as a trap. Suddenly, a crossbow bolt thuds into the tree right next to her head. Ben is perched high on the ridges above, hunting her like game. Sasha sprints through a labyrinth of rocky canyons, dodging a relentless rain of arrows until a final bolt tears through the flesh of her leg. She stumbles, loses her balance, and crashes down a rocky embankment, slamming her head against the boulders of a rushing river. Fighting a dark wave of unconsciousness, Sasha uses every ounce of her survival instinct to drag her mangled body from the fierce current. She finds herself on a lonely bank, Ben's dropped phone still clutched in her hand. She tries to dial for rescue, but the screen flickers and dies, the water has destroyed it. Forcing herself to stay calm, she tends to her wound, eats a small ration of Ben's jerky, and pushes forward, knowing the predator is closing in. Realizing that running along the canyon floor makes her an easy target from above, she uses her rock climbing skills to scale a sheer rock chimney, bringing herself up to Ben's elevation where the dense foliage can hide her. Using her binoculars, she spots his camp in the distance and sees Ben navigating the terrain with terrifying ease, utilizing hidden shortcuts he has carved into the forest over years of hunting humans. When Ben suddenly spots her through the tree line, Sasha drops her binoculars and hides inside a deep crevice beneath a massive boulder. Ben stalks right past her hiding spot, missing her by inches. Seeing an opportunity born of desperation, Sasha doubles back to Ben's own base camp, betting that he won't expect his prey to hide in his lair. There, she discovers a scene of terrifying calm. Ben is casually bathing in the river, completely relaxed, utterly confident that she cannot escape his forest. Quietly, Sasha slips into the water, aiming to steal his motorized boat and escape. But as she reaches for the hull, she triggers a hidden tripwire. A heavy weighted net explodes from the trees, trapping her beneath the surface. As she thrashes for air, Ben hears the commotion, confidently walks over, and begins hauling the net in. Thinking quickly, Sasha pulls a small canister of pepper spray from her pocket and blasts him directly in the face. Blinded and screaming in pain, Ben stumbles back to wash his eyes. Sasha struggles to free herself, but Ben recovers with terrifying speed, leveling his crossbow at her chest. He orders her to drop the spray, and outmatched, she complies. Instead of killing her, Ben unties the net and drags her to a massive tree, binding her tightly to the trunk. As the rain pours down, Sasha asks if this is all just a sick game to him. Ben laughs, explaining that it is a holy ritual inherited from his ancestral cannibalistic tribe. He explains that after enduring immense physical trials, his people sharpen their teeth into points to consume the flesh of their prey. More importantly, he believes that by consuming the liver of a strong, resilient soul, he can absorb their spirit and keep them with him forever. He points to a grotesque, preserved corpse hanging in the shadows of his cabin, the remains of his own mother, whose liver he consumed first. He tells Sasha that she has given him the most exhilarating hunt of his life, and because her soul is so beautifully strong, he cannot wait to taste her liver. The next morning, Ben throws a feverish, shivering Sasha into his boat to transport her to his sacred ground. During the journey, he taunts her about Tommy's death, accusing her of murdering her husband on that mountain cliff. Sasha remains silent, her eyes locking onto a sharp piece of metal scrap on the floor of the boat. She reaches for it, but Ben catches her. Furious, he binds her hands and throws her overboard, towing her body through the freezing, rocky rapids behind the speeding boat. By the time they reach a hidden cavern, Sasha is battered, bleeding, and barely conscious. Ben drags her inside, and the true horror of his operation is revealed. The cavern is a literal slaughterhouse. The missing hikers are hanging from the ceiling like cattle, stripped naked, covered in curing salt, and dried. In a sickening flash of realization, Sasha remembers the jerky she had been eating. It wasn't animal meat. As Ben approaches her with a razor-sharp carving knife to extract her liver, Sasha summons a final surge of primal adrenaline. She leans forward and bites down on his ear with savage force, tearing at the flesh. In the explosive chaos, she wrenches her bound hands free and bolts toward the deep water inside the cave, throwing herself into the subterranean current. Ben dives in right behind her. Realizing her trailing rope is caught on his gear, she uses a sharp stone to saw through the cord, freeing herself just as the current sweeps them both over a subterranean waterfall. Ben hits a jagged rock head first and floats to the surface, unconscious. Sasha drags herself onto a gravel bar, spotting his unmoving body nearby. She lifts a heavy stone, intending to crush his skull and end the nightmare, but Ben's eyes snap open. He lunges, pinning her to the ground and crushing her throat with his bare hands. Sasha suffocates, staring into the eyes of her killer, when suddenly, a bizarre wave of twisted admiration crosses Ben's face. He releases his grip, sparing her life, and even revives her, perhaps wanting to preserve the thrill of the hunt. But the moment Sasha catches her breath, she exploits his momentary weakness, kicking him off the ledge and shattering his leg with a massive boulder. Ben screams in agony, completely immobilized. Exhausted, broken, and deeply wounded, Sasha tries to walk away, but her body finally collapses a few yards away. As night falls, the hunter and the prey lie a short distance apart in the dark wilderness, bleeding into the dirt. Ben clutches his knife, knowing the tables have completely turned. Looking across the dark space, Sasha finally breaks her silence. She tells Ben the true story of her husband's death. She confesses that it was her stubborn pride that kept them on that mountain, and that she willingly let go of the rope to save herself, never knowing if Tommy was alive or dead. She tells Ben that the guilt has been eating her alive, but in this forest, fighting for her breath, she finally understands the value of her own survival. When the sun rises, Sasha proposes a grim compromise. They are trapped at the base of a massive, vertical stone cliff. She tells Ben that his leg is severely infected and he will die a slow, agonizing death in a matter of days, and while she could wait for him to rot, she wants out of the forest now. She explains that she can scale the sheer cliff face and lead them to the main road in minutes, but she needs his upper body strength to help manage the ropes. Ben, terrified of dying alone in the dirt, agrees under one condition, that she doesn't drop him the way she dropped her husband. They begin the grueling, agonizing ascent up the sheer rock face, bound together by ropes. But the truce is an illusion. High up on the cliff, Sasha begins covertly manipulating her harness, preparing to cut Ben loose. Sensing the shift in the ropes, Ben reacts with violent fury, yanking her line and leaving her dangling in the open air. He threatens to cut her throat if she tries anything again. Sasha plays the victim, gasping that she was only adjusting her gear for his safety. Ben relents, allowing her to climb higher. Soon, they reach a massive, overhanging crux on the cliff, the exact structural layout of the rock face in Norway that had always defeated her. It is her ultimate psychological hurdle. Sasha pauses, looking at the void below, but this time, the fear is gone. Quietly, she loops her primary safety line around a sturdy alpine root growing from the rock, anchoring herself independently. Then, with absolute, cold precision, she unbuckles the safety harness connecting her to Ben. Ben realizes what she is doing a second too late. He reaches out to drag her down with him, but Sasha releases the line. Ben plummets down the massive vertical drop, slamming into the jagged rocks below in an echo of Tommy's death, but this time, there is no guilt. It is absolute justice. Sasha sits on the tiny rock ledge, her safety harness gone, completely stranded on the cliff face with no gear left. To survive, she must finish the climb completely unassisted, with no safety net. Fueled by a primal will to live, she claws her way up the remaining stone, conquering the very obstacle that had haunted her for years. She drags her body over the final crest, collapsing onto the flat ground above, weeping with a chaotic mixture of grief, triumph, and overwhelming relief. Walking toward a nearby mountain road, a passing park utility vehicle spots her bloodied figure and rescues her. Back at the ranger station, Sasha exposes the horrific truth of the forest, guiding heavily armed authorities back to Ben's cavern of horrors and bringing closure to the families of the missing. As she finally leaves the wilderness behind, Sasha walks to the edge of a deep coastal overlook. She takes Tommy's lucky compass out of her pocket, looks at it one last time, and casts it deep into the crashing waves below. The heavy mantle of guilt falls away. Sasha steps back from the edge, finally free, ready to live the life she fought so desperately to keep.